Hey everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's June 29th, 2022. My name is Eric Osterman and I'll be leading the conversation. I can't believe it's already at the end of June. So painful. I'm the founder of CEO. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, and that means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format's informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So if you want to participate, just go ahead and unmute yourself at any time. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions just by heading over to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded, and we're going to automatically post a video recording of our session today to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and want to support what we do here, it's a big help if you go and hit those like and subscribe buttons. So with that said, let's jump into some announcements for the past week. So the first one that caught my eye was a recent one this morning was 1Password has announced that they are going to help you keep track of which one of those 5 social login buttons you clicked when you joined that site. So you don't have to go through the new onboarding experience or the rigmarole of figuring out how bad the process is when the site doesn't remember which site you signed up with. So I'm excited about that little incremental improvement. I've been using 1Password for so long now, I can't compare and contrast it to LastPass or Dashlane or some of the other ones. Does LastPass have this functionality? Anyone know?
I have never seen it.
I feel like after LastPass was acquired, the development on LastPass just went to nothing. And so I wholeheartedly recommend 1Password for everybody encounter.
That's really interesting.
We just had this discussion like like not the last one or the one before. Everybody was in the chat talking about which ones they use, and 1Password came up quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, 1Password is our go-to for companies, especially because they got multiple tiers that fit most budgets. With business class being, or teams being the cheapest for like a startup environment, business being advised after that, and then enterprise. Also, what's really nice, I believe if you're at least on business class, every employee that you add on there also is extended a free family plan so that they can start using it for their personal life. And you can see how important that is because of phishing attacks and things like that. Ensuring employees also have good password hygiene at home and in the family can reduce can improve some of your security.
Yeah, 1Password has really matured over the last couple of years. I mean, not that it wasn't already matured, but there was a lot of friction when they moved to version 8.0. People didn't like that it was going to like Electron, and it was being a little less Mac-y and more kind of abstract. But it's very polished, and these features continue to just drive the industry for password management. I mean, it blows LastPass out of the water at this point.
That's cool. I'm glad to hear that, because it was always this race up or run up for us when we were talking with customers, like, should we use LastPass or 1Password? We really prefer 1Password. 1Password works really well across organizations as well. So that's why we like it. On that note, you made me think about, there's also that awesome new feature I've been using a lot. I love the built-in SSH agent in 1Password 8. So if you haven't started taking advantage of that, that's really nice. And you can just, authenticate the login request by using the touch on your laptop. Any other runner-ups that you guys like in terms of password management, since we're on the topic?
Just a quick comment around LastPass, because I still actively use it and I've been considering 1Password. And one of the things that has really bit me is the business tier, and LastPass has OTP support, but the personal plan does not have it. So you have to upgrade your personal to business if you want to use one-time secrets. Whereas in 1Password, you just get that out of the box for free on all the tiers.
So LastPass now does support, but it's only personal. They're not shared, and that's the other thing I don't like about LastPass.
Oh,
is that you can have the OTPs, but they're not shared.
Oh, it's shared in business, but it's
Oh,
only.
it is shared in business.
It doesn't share back to your personal account. So I've got linked accounts set up.
Yeah.
But basically everything you guys have said has reaffirmed I should be switching over to 1Password. So I appreciate that.
Okay, let us know how it goes. All right. Next announcement was, so it was funny. Space, we are obviously partners with Spacelift. We work with them a lot. Marcin reached out to me the other day and said, hey, I noticed you guys have a Terraform module for sending messages using local exec and Terraform. Well, he has a better solution now. He needed it for something he's working on. He's created a bona fide provider for SMTP, so you can now send transactional emails related to your Terraform. This is good and bad. If this works really well. We were using it like for back in the day before we had AWS SO and federated or IAM SAML. We were provisioning IAM users. So we were using this to notify users that their account was created, and it worked pretty well, except for it didn't. So sometimes, like, how do you resend that email to the user if they, oh, I deleted it, or I didn't see it, or if that, or if the password expired or something? What do you do? And that workflow turned out to be pretty difficult using pure Terraform. Maybe it's a little bit easier now, but I still like the idea where you can have emails go out maybe to third-party services when certain things happen. For example, a new release, a new ECS task was deployed with a new image tag, and you want that to go to some informed party who isn't in your Slack team and wouldn't get your other notifications. This is a way you could do that. There is an example here. That was not it. And basically, it becomes a new resource with the standard fields you expect to see in an email. Anybody else have any use cases this would address or solve?
What SMTP is it using? Spacelift? It's
No. That's the provider configuration. Yeah. So you'd set up the provider with the auth statement. Now, this is not a great example here, but I'm sure in the docs there will be a better definition of that, maybe, or maybe not. So this was brand new, released 3 days ago. So I'm guessing he's still catching up on all of that. Oh, here we go. So schema, host and username, and then the auth mechanism, and it supports plain and cram MD5. All right, next announcement that I saw, this was just an informal trend report. So this wasn't based on like a statistically significant sample or anything. But you can see the responses here and by who made them, like Microsoft Azure, Funnable, and so forth. But the summary from this that I got from it was that it's interesting that there's a significant majority starting to actually adopt GitOps practices based on this, and a focus on more observability and functions as a service. I don't know. I'm on the fence on functions as a service if you are the one managing the platform for functions as a service. But if you're using like a managed cloud offering like AWS Lambda or Cloudflare Workers, I can get it. And then the late majority are just getting in touch with software-defined networks. So that anybody using AWS has been doing that now for a decade. So how was that? Let me jump on to the next announcement. So this was one this was one bug. So look, Terraform is not the best tool in the world for managing your Helm releases on Kubernetes and using platforms like Argo CD and Flux, or possibly others are more well suited for it. However, it's still excellent for deploying Argo CD itself. And like our situations, we deploy with Terraform, we Terraform out the deployment repositories needed by Argo CD. We Terraform the deployment of Argo CD itself, such that everything else you do can therefore be done with Argo CD. So I think it's a pretty nice pattern. The other problem when you're using other systems than Terraform is, even if you're using Argo CD, is like, how are you going to get those IAM roles? You're still going to need Terraform. So when you have this tight coupling between things in AWS or your cloud provider and the thing you're deploying to Kubernetes, they're diminishing returns using just the native like solution like Argo CD. Nonetheless, we've been bitten by this problem, which is that if you're deploying a new chart and it fails, the Terraform state was still updated as though it had succeeded. And this to me seems like this is like a, I can't emphasize enough how scary this is. There should be like a contract that Terraform state can never, ever in any way possibly be updated if there was a failure. And here it was possible that it was updated. So obviously this was related to the provider and there was a bug in the provider, and therefore I'm guessing Terraform core doesn't have this problem, and that providers, if misimplemented, can really have such a bad impact on your desired state. So this was finally fixed and merged. This was merged 2 weeks ago. It was opened in February. And it was released in the very recent release of the Helm provider here, 2.6.0. I don't know if we have anyone from my team here, like RB. I know there were some issues with this, that it wasn't just a drop-in upgrade, that other things broke as a result of this too, but don't recall. Anyone had this particular issue, or anyone had bad experiences with the Helm provider and Terraform? All right, moving on. So, you know, what was it? Starbucks started serving breakfast, and then McDonald's started serving coffee. In the same vein, GitHub announced Copilot, I guess last year sometime, and Amazon now released CodeWhisperer to compete with that. So CodeWhisperer is their alternative solution for basically automatic copy pasta from Stack Overflow into your code to speed up your development process. Now, Vlad, I think you've done some testing with this, or played around with this some more, and you were pleasantly surprised with how well CodeWhisperer worked for you as an early preview release. So do you want to share anything on that?
Yeah, I was expecting it to be yet another boring AWS failure in the developer experience space, because many, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I'm gonna ignore the whole code repository thingies, because those are not even talked about. But yeah, I was expecting a bad clone of Copilot, and it wasn't that. It's surprisingly awesome. I am lucky enough to be part of the preview, so I got to test it for a couple of days to a week now. I think it's been a week. It's not, it doesn't support as many things as Copilot supports. So with Copilot, you could do Terraform. You don't want to do Terraform with Copilot in any way, shape, or form. Like, I tried it, it's terrible. You get 0.12 autocomplete and examples. It's horribly outdated, hard-coded things everywhere. You just don't want to do it.
That just, I guess it's just a reflection of the state of Terraform code on GitHub, or the state of open source Terraform code that it has to pull from. There isn't that many great examples, maybe.
Exactly, and there's a more complex problem that there's no recency bias in how they train, and a whole big discussion there. But yeah, CodeWhisperer was surprisingly nice, and unlike, in addition to all the features Copilot has, it also has a really nice, what they call it, reference mode or something like that, where basically they tell you, hey, we took this code from here. So you can look like, oh, they took this code from like a super reputable open source repo. Oh, they took this code from there. It's not available for every single autocomplete they do, because some of it is like genuine new code built by their ML models. But yeah, it was a surprisingly nice experience. It's in preview right now. You've got to apply to it. But I'm excited. I really hope this is going to. I had a Twitter thread on it earlier today, comparing it with Copilot. I linked it in the chat. But yeah, I really hope this is gonna be like AWS flexing their ML muscle and really proving that they can build a proper developer focus tool. Because so far they've been killing it. Like their VS Code extension is awesome. I haven't tried the JetBrains integration, and yeah, I really liked it. I'm excited for it.
And so CodeWhisperer is integrated with VS Code?
Yes.
Cool.
It's going to be. It's an extra extension right now. I think it's going to be part of the default AWS extension. I don't know for sure. Also, if you've got like test ideas you want to see, please reply on Twitter, because I didn't know exactly what I should test, and some examples were boring and things like that. So open to ideas.
Anybody been using GitHub Copilot up until now?
I have used GitHub Copilot, and it's pretty cool for what it does, especially for Terraform. A well-named variable can get you a lot of boilerplate code with just a tab, like not too much effort. I have not tried CodeWhisperer, but I guess the question that I have for Vlad, did you run into any conflicts? Like, say, if you had Copilot installed, did you have to turn one off to use the other? And what kind of configuration did you have to do?
They do use different key bindings. One is option C, the other one is option square bracket or something. So they shouldn't conflict, and they both have options for you to disable auto suggestion. So like you don't write a line of code and both CodeWhisperer and Copilot suddenly start fighting for a space on your screen. I honestly haven't tried to use them at the same time. I use Copilot in GitHub's code spaces and CodeWhisperer on my local machine. But again, they use different key bindings, so I wouldn't expect them to conflict.
Cool. Any other questions on this topic? All right. Thanks, Vlad, for that overview. I'm excited to try that out. Two small minor announcements. One, if you are using GitHub Actions and caching, it's been a little bit opaque. You're kind of just stashing bits somewhere, and managing it has been painful, especially if you need to invalidate that cache, which happens frequently in CI if you corrupt it somehow by a bad build or something. So they've made it a lot easier to deal with the cache now. You can list and filter it and then delete directly what's in there. And the last announcement was another one from you, Vlad. Let's see here. I'm going to open this one up, and where's that link coming? Where is it? I'll just get it in the chat. So Vlad, you mentioned that there's been improvements to the performance of the EKS control plane.
Yeah, they officially posted a blog post 4 times as fast. Again, this is the control plane, it's not your actual nodes.
Yeah, you saw your workloads, but
yeah, this
so
is
launching
mostly,
nodes launching therefore containers should be faster.
Yes, this is going to affect people in 2 big ways. So upgrades, they're gonna be way faster. They go in the blog further on this, but they basically moved from doing slow rolling deploy to blue-green deploys for how they manage the master node. So great job AWS on that. And the second way this is going to impact people is if you scale a lot or if you have super spiky scaling. So what people used to do, and they mentioned that in the blog post, is if you scaled a lot or had even the slightest, not the slightest, but if you had the spikes in scaling, you would get a bunch of rate limits from ETF. And the solution to that was like create a support ticket where you're basically, hey, AWS, I scale a lot, please scale up my EKS cluster and keep it super high scaled. And they gladly do that. It was a super easy ticket to do. It didn't come with an increase in cost. So it was still $75 a month, even though they basically over provisioned a bunch of instances from you. So a lot of those tickets should disappear. Not all of them, but a lot of them should not be an issue anymore. And yeah, I'm excited. And this is the type of improvement that showcases like, yeah, I definitely want this to be a managed service. I want AWS to focus on optimizing the startup speed and the scaling speed and all those things that if I were managing my own clusters, I wouldn't have the time or the resources to do. So very excited about this. And this is paving the way for, they mentioned this in the blog post, for 15,000 node clusters, if anybody's doing really big clusters.
I wonder how this will affect your previous research on scaling containers on AWS and if you'll see an improvement then.
I did exactly what I mentioned. So for all my testing, and this is in the blog post, I was fully transparent about it. I did get all my cluster pre-scaled. So support ticket to AWS, hey, I've got 3 clusters, please scale them to the highest level you can, because otherwise you just get a bunch of errors. It's mostly failed to create pod sandbox because the CNI is getting limited, and there are a bunch of other things running on the control plane that are suddenly getting very cranky. If you if your cluster does nothing for a couple of days, and then you suddenly scale to 3,500 containers in a second.
In this post, did you talk about what you did for EKS specifically?
Yep. All the details are here. The Terraform code is open source. It's horrible code. Don't use it, but it's there. Like, no, I was fully transparent again. And there are a lot of other things that can be optimized if you need your EKS cluster to scale faster. This is, again, this blog post just shows default-ish scaling. There are a lot other knobs that you can tweak to get way faster scaling.
Yeah, here's where you talk about what you did there in prep work. Okay, cool. Any questions on that before we get into talking points? Or any other announcements we should bring up? Cool. Let's get into Q&A then. So we picked up a few topics from the Slack, and also there was a topic that we started talking about at the end of last week. The cat scratch we had was diagrams and documentation, and I'm brain farting. I don't remember the context more than that. Vlad, do you remember?
Nope. Like that's exactly what I was worried.
What was that, Andy?
We were looking at Ice Panel, and it was a really nice tool.
And yeah.
I'd wanted to talk about documentation in more general.
Yeah.
Strategies on it.
Yeah, I mean, this was really interesting to me. I haven't yet had a chance to play with it, but it resonates with me entirely. This little emotion, or this little graphic here, which is that, you know, what most diagrams are showing you is just what's above the surface, what's pretty, what's easily digestible by the users. And if you try to put all the information into one diagram, that diagram is useless to everybody. So you end up having to create lots of diagrams, but the relationship between your diagrams is cumbersome to illustrate. And Ice Panel seems to make that a native concept where you can drill into parts of a diagram and then see that architecture. But that's just me reading what this says and not trying it out and reading between the lines of what Vlad said last week. So how to organize information. Yeah. So I guess
chat about this now, if you want. Like,
what comes up? What comes to mind?
I'm pretty set. So for me, like, automatic diagrams are useless. Not useless, but they're not very useful. See, that's the more polite way of putting it, because they don't capture business context and they don't have enough detail. Most of, like, a lot of my job is doing diagrams, explaining ideas and concepts to people. And it's extremely easy to do that when you have a diagram that is easily understandable by people. Oh, I don't need my diagrams to be code. I don't need my diagrams to be automatically updated. The first and most important thing I need is for the diagrams to explain things as clearly and as fast as possible. And that cannot be done with any automatic diagramming system or anything like that. It's like the code documents itself or automatic documentation for your code. Yeah, it's better than nothing, but
Yeah.
also pretty useless. So,
Yeah.
and also the diagrams that I do are like, I have a professional designer and UX expert that I work with. I've got a bunch of things, and there are only two valid tools on the market for it, in my view. If you're on Windows, it's Visio, which is Microsoft's official thingy for doing diagrams. And if you are on macOS, it's OmniGraffle. Like, that's it. No Draw.io, no code, whatever, no Figma, although Figma's doing some interesting things, because I do need a bunch of layers, and as soon as you start having like 50 icons, the browser tools get weird and you cannot properly arrange things, or you cannot have enough layers,
Yeah.
or you don't have enough fonts or colors, or you cannot properly do things. So yeah, that's my view. But again, I do in-depth diagrams that really need to tell a story. It's not, oh, we have this as an action item, we're gonna throw something together, nobody's gonna look at it, and it's not gonna help anybody. Like, focus on what I've seen works best is focus on a couple diagrams, like high level business context, things that don't change that often, and they're awesome, especially as onboarding. And those need to be handcrafted. I know, happy to be challenged on this.
Yeah. No. What's everyone else's take on the current state of diagramming and how to do it? I agree that I'm not that fond of the automatically generated ones. It's better than nothing, but and I guess you get them with 20% of the effort it would take to do it by hand. So following the Pareto principle there. But those can also be just as damaging if you are then saving those automatically generated ones that, committing those to version control and then not updating them. So then not only do you have a less descriptive model, it's a less descriptive model of something that's no longer the case. So then if you're doing it programmatically, they should stay current and updated.
Well, I'd assert even if you did it programmatically that, whatever abstraction you use to like whittle down, because you have to whittle down the data to a point where you can tell the narrative, right?
Yeah.
And the process of doing, whether it's in text form or whether it's Lucid Scale is what Lucidchart is trying to push on companies now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And unless you're able to describe, maintain like, like you essentially create the functions to describe how you're narrowing down the data field to represent just the core aspects of what you want to represent and do the grouping. It's really a hard problem, honestly. And I've used tools like Plant UML in order to describe in text. You could also use things like Mermaid.js and whatnot. But the problem with using text editors, right, is that, yeah, you can check it into code and yeah, ostensibly you can make updates, but then the process of creating the visual to communicate your narrative, it's hard to do in text because you can't drag and drop the elements around. You have to figure out how to do it using their DSL. So like, there's no optimal solution. I just find that there's just a number of suboptimal solutions out there. And what I do is most often, it just depends on the number of elements. If I have a lot of elements to deal with, then I'll just do the text elements and then just kind of have suboptimal visual. If I could try to whittle it down to a few elements, I'll use something like Realboard or Lucidchart.
Realboard, I haven't heard of that one.
It's Miro. It's what Miro turned into. But essentially, they're what they offer. That's not the thing. I'll find the link and post it in chat.
Okay. Does anyone know if Lucid Scale will? So one of my problems also with the automatically generated ones is I want to keep them up to date. So I'd like to be able to more or less hide and maybe unhide nodes and what do you call them? branches, whatever, in the diagram, edges, that's the term I was looking for. But, and then when it updates, I don't want those to get unhidden. And I also want to not have to keep like manipulating it as it pulls in new data into the diagram. Is that how these tools work?
I think it tries to. I think it tries to offer you the semantics the semantics to do so, but I haven't been able to get to work that way.
In Brainboard, it's come up before. I saw somebody also asking in the Zoom chat here about it. I haven't played with it either. Anytime something is trying to tell me that that I can use a visual diagram, it's going to generate my code. That's great. I think this is a great, like, this should just be embedded into like learn Terraform tutorials or something like that. But like for doing the actual work itself, as a programmer, I prefer to work in the code itself. I guess it's akin to modern mobile development and how it's based on the IDE and it's auto-completing a lot of things for you, which is a form of development I never grew into. So
is Brainboard automatically converting Terraform into a diagram?
I think it's the other way around. I think you do the diagram and it'll spit out the Terraform for it.
Seems backwards.
I don't want to misspeak here, but that's, yeah, here, stop writing your Terraform code, design it.
Oh, okay. That's I'm a little stunned. I'm definitely have to take a look.
It's, this is where I think it demos very well, but in the fundamental sense, if you're looking at creating modules and reusable modules and all of those things, there's no way a tool like that is taking that into account. And this is great if you're just like anti-module, I guess. Go on. Someone was speaking up.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, like, one thing that I always found with tools like this is that it's great when you're kind of like you said, maybe if it's a trivial model or not even model, but you're just pulling something together. I want to do an EC2. Yeah, that's great. But as soon as you get into a little bit more complexity, at least the tools that I've seen, I can't speak to this tool specifically, but I wonder if it's the same paradigm where you can go in to configure the little thing that you've drawn and you have to give it code to configure it. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, why not just write the code in the first place and just have it, as a seamless experience instead of this sort of, you're straddling the fence of graphics and code and it just kind of gets a little funky that way.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next talking point. So this one sits close to my heart, and I think it is worthy of bringing up. So this person, I don't believe they're on office hours right now, but they were asking in our sweetops Slack. If you haven't joined, let's just go to slack.cloudposse.com. But they're describing this problem that they ran into, basically that, they are using Terraform. They've come up with this module. It's perfect. They can, add all the synthetic monitors it needs for a swath of websites that they have, in this case, 1,500 sites. And if only, Terraform didn't have these rate limits, or if only NewRelic didn't have these rate limits, then my life would be easier and all these problems would go away. But I think I think there's a bigger problem in this case. So a Teralith can exist in more than one way. And so there's the concept of a Teralith, which is kind of where you have a very large Terraform module that provisions your VPC and your subnets and your EKS cluster and your services in your cluster, your load balancers, your WAF, and you put that all in a module and deploy it, and hey, it works. And the great thing is Terraform figures out the DAG and everything is great. Or you can, the even worst case of a Teralith is that same module now will Terraform dev staging and prod, and now that you're really screwed because making any change to this could potentially affect any one of those environments. But this is the same thing, just in a different way. So if you designed a module, maybe it's just a few lines of code, or maybe it's a little bit more, but the blast radius of making a change to that module based on your configuration means that 1,500 sites could be modified. That is a problem as well. So that's an architectural problem in how this was modeled. So I think the better way of designing this would be probably not changing too much at all about your Terraform root module, but instead breaking your inputs down into smaller sets. How you partition that would be based on some business logic. And if you're using the Cloud Posse tooling, this is where we would call the the NewRelic synthetic ping root module would be called a component. And then we would create a configuration for that, a stack configuration, and we would break this down into some logical grouping there with stack config. So it would be the same exact Terraform code that you could invoke based on a certain number of partitions and terraforming it out. Now, if you needed to terraform all 1,500 sites every single time, because you're changing everything literally every single time, I guess it's not really helping that situation much. However, it could be argued that even in that situation, wouldn't you want to minimize the impact and make smaller changes and let those bake in before moving on to the next set of sites? So that's my 2 cents. Anyone else have something to add to this? All right. And the next talking point was, yeah, so this one's come up every now and then. I thought I'd address it one more time. So when using modules, private modules in a private GitHub repo or GitLab repo, how do you programmatically and securely pull that module without hard coding any personal access keys and so forth? So there's 2 common solutions. The most common solution I see brought up is this one, is that you modify the git config, and under the hood, since the SDK, the Terraform SDK is just using the git SDK, is going to then respect that and request it. There's another solution which I think is almost simpler in some ways because it doesn't involve rewriting anything. And that is this approach here, which we tend to gravitate towards, which is a little unknown file called netrc. You create this netrc file, and then you can put in the basic auth user and password needed by this, and it will be respected by the Git CLI and Terraform and many other services as well. So I believe it's in the standard networking library that's under the hood used by the Go SDK for this and other things. So this is a cross tool solution. So all right. And last question I had, somebody had asked here, anyone using lenses.io? They were acquired by I can't say it, Selenosis last October, and sales hasn't been very responsive, which is making him nervous. We haven't ruled them out, but keeping an eye out for options. So what is Lenses doing? Because I think about Lens for Kubernetes, but this is slightly different. Real-time data without a PhD in Kafka. So is it like a managed Kafka solution? So yeah, I don't have anything to add. Anyone know the situation with Lenses right now? All right. Well, I'm out of questions there. Let's check the Zoom chat. See what's going on there. All right, no questions there. Let's check the Slack. And no questions there. So I'm out of materials. Any other questions, talking points, considerations?
Quiet bunch.
Yeah, white group.
I had a question, actually. I mean, I don't know if it's relevant or not, but I just started using GitHub and I moved all of my stuff out of Bitbucket into GitHub. And
Okay.
with that being said, I tried to create I created a repo in GitHub, and then on my local machine in the CLI, I tried to push some new files up to GitHub, and it was failing, saying that it was, it was asking for my username and password, which is kind of deprecated, I guess, or something, and it was asking me to create a personal access token, which I did, but I noticed that I had to, like, every new repo I created in GitHub, I had to set my URL for the origin to be like git@github.com, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know if there's a way, if I'm just, is there something I'm doing wrong? Because I'm kind of new to the commands for GitHub, for using Git. To that extent, I don't know if I'm posing my question correctly, but
No, that makes sense.
Is
Yeah,
that
basically GitHub supports multiple ways of authentication. One
Yeah.
is HTTP based, and that's what you're using there. That's
Right.
convenient for like when you're using it in a CI context, maybe where it's harder to have an SSH key in place. In your situation, what you want to do is go into your profile and just add your own personal SSH, your public key there. And this is a perfect
public key pair, right?
yeah, so this is a perfect relationship. If you're using 1Password now, what I would do is generate that private key in 1Password and then take the public key, put that in GitHub. Now, anytime you commit, in order to do that, you gotta do the touch authentication to approve that.
Okay, so I didn't need to necessarily create a personal access token. I could have just
No.
uploaded my my key pair.
Yeah.
I'll do that after this call. I'm going to try that now. Thank you. That helps.
Yeah, historically what it was is they allowed you to have your password in there, and that wasn't secure since people were putting
Sure.
that in CI systems. So then they pushed it to you have to create that personal access token. And yeah, so that's where
Okay, great. Thanks.
it came from. Yeah, sure thing.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
How many people here use pre-commit hooks when they're for their repos? Is that something you guys use, or I see it come up a lot in a lot of open source software where they use these pre-commit hooks, but I've never used them.
Most of my team is pretty fond of them. I think there's one or two people who isn't crazy about pre-commit hooks. It's Scout's honor, and they don't enforce anything. What I think is personally interesting is you combine pre-commit hooks with a GitHub action to enforce them. So now what you can do is just ensure that everyone's following it locally before they push the code up. But if they didn't do it, then it's enforced on the CI at the CI stage. Oh, hey everybody, welcome to Elias. He's the newest attendee here for Office Hours. Hey Elias, Daddy has to.
Hey,
Oh,
Elias.
Daddy got packages. Hey, 1 second.
Life
Maybe he'll
is
have a
normal.
question.
Life is normal. This is totally okay. And as an aside, I do use pre-commit hooks. They're helpful in the sense that they help me not totally break things before I push them. So the easiest example for this group would be like to run Terraform validate. Sometimes I just forget to hit save or something like that, and I push a file that is completely and utterly broken. A pre-commit hook saves me from that. Same for format and things like that. They're an easy extra check that is then revalidated by GitHub actions, like just as Eric said. First, all the pre-commit hooks are checked, like the Terraform is valid, the Terraform is formatted, and then more in-depth checks are done just to make sure that we don't run 100 really complex jobs and they all fail because the Terraform was invalid because I forgot to save the file.
Yeah.
Speaking of pre-commit hooks, I'm wondering, is there one that will help me check that I included a back end in my Terraform? Because I moved from a company that had cloud and I never had to worry about that.
Yeah.
With another.
Yeah. That's a good example of having one. I don't know. There's a library of these somewhere you can search. I forget, or like awesome list or something of pre-commit hooks.
Yeah,
That would be a good
I
example.
see them used quite often, like whenever I'm, downloading something from GitHub or whatever. But I've never used them, and I always I'm trying to see ways of incorporating it. So
This is where I think though, it could be, I'm not sure which one of the policy engines it would be. Sorry guys for the distraction here. This would be a good example, I think, though, of having a policy-based pre-commit check where you actually have a policy that a backend must exist. And then it would also be able to check for other policies that you have in place. So not specifically a pre-commit check just for backends, but a pre-commit that checks for your OPA policy.
So an OPA policy, got it.
Yeah.
Thanks, I'll look into that.
One thing I want to kind of share that if you don't know about is that you can define a hooks path in your Git config. And what a hooks path will do is it allow you to have like I have a .files repository that I keep my .files in, and I include my my pre-commit, post-commit, whatever hooks in there that is universal across my my repositories. And one of those pre-commit hooks for me is a credentials check. There's a couple of ways to do that. There's a couple of people who make credentials checks, but you could find a credential checker to check to see if you've committed any credentials. And that's one thing that I do.
Yeah. That's
yeah, this
another
is
good
perfect right here. What you have on the screen. This is great.
And this is Anton's repo, his pre-commit hooks for Terraform. So we'll share that.
Nice. Well, thank you.
At least a good place to get started. Yeah, good question. Cool. Any other questions?
I do have a question. I'm not sure if this is the right place for it, but I haven't used any Kafka type things, and we're trying to decide between, Confluent Kafka and Amazon MSK. If anyone has any experience using any of those, any thoughts you could share?
I think it's a fair question. I don't have anything to add to it, but yeah, anyone have experience between the two and when to go with which? All right.
Confluent Kafka used to be better, but I don't know if that's still the case. I don't have enough MSK experience to comment on it.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, maybe we'll give you back 10 minutes of your time this week. Thanks everyone for your participation in our weekly office hours. If you haven't yet registered for our weekly office hours, head over to cloudposse.com/office hours and register so you'll get the weekly invite. If you haven't connected with me, go ahead and add me on LinkedIn. Just go to linkedin.com/in/Osterman and connect. And always, if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel or like some of our videos, it's a great way of helping us grow our reach, and we really appreciate any subscribers we get over there. So please check that out. Anyway, see you all next week, same time, same place. Love you.